Hi, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining me on today's AdminChat webinar. My name is Susan Schofield, and I am so excited to be speaking with you all as part of the Executive Secretary's new AdminChat series. Today, I'm going to be going over some best practices in travel planning for others and to help you save time, money, and most importantly, your sanity. Before I get started, I wanted to give you all a little background about me and the company I work for, TRAVO. I've been with TRAVO for a little over 2 years now, and during that time, I have spoken with thousands of administrative professionals from around the world and have had the opportunity to team up with some of the top training organizations like Executive Secretary. During this time, I learned one important lesson. Planning travel is hard, but planning travel for others is even harder. This has actually been the number one driving factor for TRAVO ever since our inception. Our CEO and founder, Tae Lee, started TRAVO after shadowing his administrative professional for a day and saw just how hard it was to plan travel for others. Not only was she trying to find the best prices, she was matching each traveler's preferences, sending trips for approval, finalizing bookings, and creating end-to-end itineraries. He was totally blown away by how complicated this process was and set out to simplify it. Ever since then, we have been interviewing every user to find out what their biggest travel planning pain points are. And I'm excited to share a little bit about what we've learned today and some of the best ways to alleviate those issues. During today's webinar, we will cover the following pain points. 1. Inefficient profile creation, storing, and sharing. 2. Incomplete trip requests. 3. Time-consuming research for flights, hotels, and rental cars. 4. Delayed trip approvals. And 5. Manually creating end-to-end itineraries. My goal is to provide you all with some simple steps and tools that can help solve these pain points and get you started on planning travel faster, easier, and of course, smarter. Okay, let's get started. We're going to begin with creating, storing, and sharing traveler profiles, since really that is the best place to start because that's where all of it stems from when you're planning for somebody else. Most administrative professionals already know their travelers' preferences and information. However, few have had the chance to create a process for creating, storing, and sharing this information. Many of you have probably written your traveler's information down on a notepad or in an Excel spreadsheet on your computer. However, this comes with a number of limitations. First, they require you to be at your desk in order to plan for your traveler. Second, it's very difficult for you to share these profiles with another travel planner. Last, they do not allow you to easily collect new traveler information. We recommend creating a traveler profile form that you can use to standardize the traveler onboarding process. When you create the form, use a form creation tool like Google Forms, JotForm, or Typeform. All of these tools are awesome and they're free, and they allow you to instantly export responses as a CSV file, which makes it easy to format traveler profiles and share with other travel planners. If you have one of those travelers who's pretty reluctant to use a new tool, you can use Microsoft Office. However, keep in mind that you will need to upload responses to a cloud sharing service to make sure you and the other travel planners have access to their profiles. It is really key to be able to have the other travel planners have access because think about the times when you're away, when you're sick, or when you're taking time off. It would be really great for someone to have access to these items so that it's not just you that holds all of the information and is always getting that phone call when you're away from your desk. All right, when you're going through the process of creating your traveler profile forms, there are some basic fields for you to include. So, to begin with the basic information fields that you must include, we're going to start with general traveler information. I like to think of this as booking information or the basics because this is the information that you absolutely have to be able to book on their behalf and to be able to make any sorts of reservations for them. All right, so the general traveler information you'll need to include, of course, their name, but something to keep in mind is it must match their government issued ID, otherwise, no one's letting them on the airplane. So just because you call somebody PJ, but their name is actually Patrick James, doesn't mean that they're going to allow PJ Smith onto the airplane. Next, work email, because of course everyone is going to get emails for their receipts, flight tickets, all of that. Phone number, date of birth, gender, preferred departure address and airport, which really comes in handy when you're creating the itinerary later, specific addresses at least. And then if you live in a large city that has multiple airports, it's really helpful to know what your traveler's preferred airport is. Passport information if they travel internationally. If they have an employee ID, that's really great to be able to include in their profile as well. And then what department they're from. The last two fields are optional and depend on your company's structure. However, a lot of admins like to include this information to help with approval processes, budgeting, and accounting. Including this information helps admins keep all of their travelers' information in one place and can make submitting expense reports much easier. After general traveler information, you should collect your travelers' preferences into 4 sections: flights, hotels, ground transportation, and timing. The first section will begin with our flight preferences, mostly just because these are the more complicated options that you have to choose from when you're picking for your travelers. So I consider after general information for this to be the most important. You, of course, will want to know their preferred airlines, especially if there's many different airlines that fly in and out of your local airport. Of course, next will be all loyalty numbers with their status level. Status level is optional, but knowing which airline they have the highest status with will likely change how you choose which flight to book. The higher status, the higher the preference. And then seat preference, window versus aisle. Also, something to consider when you're picking their seat, especially if they're an aisle person, is if they're left or right handed. Just because if there's somebody that's going to be working a lot on the airplane, it's good to think, okay, if he's right handed, he'll want to have an aisle seat that's on the left hand side of the plane. So that gives his arm a little bit more movement. Not required, but something nice to think about when you're planning for them. And then TSA pre-check number. A lot of frequent flyers have this to help them skip the lines. Then class of service. Class of service is optional and should only be included if your traveler and company allow for flights to be booked outside of economy class. So this is usually, some of the higher level people in the company. They usually get to book outside of just economy class and get to be bumped up to premium economy or first class. Okay, and then after flights, you're going to be collecting your traveler's hotel preferences. This section should include fields for preferred hotel chains, once again, similar to the airlines. Many travelers have a preferred hotel chain, which is usually linked up with their loyalty number. And it's great to know what their status is with that loyalty number as well. This is not as important for as the airline loyalty numbers are, but it can help them with skipping lines. Or I know, for example, a traveler that every time he goes to a Marriott, they know exactly what pillows he wants in his room and even to the temperature that he would like his room based off of his loyalty profile. So that can be pretty important for someone who's a real road warrior and is out there a lot. Next is going to be preferred hotels by location. This is only necessary if you have a traveler who visits one particular location over and over again. Many of the admins we spoke to said that most of their travel is actually for the same exact itinerary. When you have a traveler who is visiting the same city with any regularity, find out which hotel or hotels they prefer in that city. This way, you always know the first hotel to check for pricing anytime they go back. Next, you're of course going to want to know minimum star rating, and this can vary a lot by city. So figure out if your traveler is really dead set on I will only stay at 4 stars and higher, because 4 stars mean kind of different in different locations sometimes. And then room type. I actually know a traveler who, even when it's just them traveling, they like to have 2 beds in the room if they're going to be there for a long time. It's just something that they prefer. And then preferred amenities. This section works best if you provide your traveler with a checklist of options where they can select all of their preferred amenities. Think things like if there's a gym or if there's a Starbucks within the hotel, and or valet, even if that's something that's really important to them. All right, so next is going to be ground transportation. Be sure to ask what their preferred ground transportation method is. Typically, administrative professionals provide their travelers with four options: rental car, rideshare services like Uber and Lyft, public transportation, and car services. So, think black car services and the whatnot. And then preferred rental company if they do like renting a car, and their loyalty numbers with status level for those rental companies. And then, once again, if they do prefer a car service or rental car, it's great to know what car type they do prefer. Additional notes and preferences, I would include this general notes box because there are so many different types of ground transportation that your travelers may prefer. These preferences are often city specific. By including this additional notes and preferences section, your traveler can include these specific instances. Last but not least are timing preferences. These are completely optional, but help a lot when you are creating those final itineraries for your traveler. Also, it just helps you be able to kind of look at their schedule, see based off of their timing preferences, based off their meetings, based off the flights that are available, if this trip is even going to work, because they are going to thank you big time if you can catch that because of this time zone or that time zone, that this meeting needs to be moved because you're going to be in Chicago and this traffic is happening, and you like to have this amount of time before the meeting or this amount of time before the airport. It's just really helpful to be able to kind of put yourself in their shoes because it's different when you're planning for them versus when you're planning for yourself. It's so much easier to think that through because you know your preferences, but these preferences really help a lot. So there are three main questions that you'll want to ask here. First, how many minutes prior to departure would your traveler like to arrive at the airport? Remember to check for domestic and international flights because it is hugely different. Flight timing preferences help you determine which flights your traveler can make and which they can't. You can also use them when creating end to end itineraries to help your traveler know exactly what time with expected traffic they should be leaving their house or hotel to get to the airport. I know that people that I plan for really, really love this just because it kind of gives them a look into the future, especially with things like Google Maps and stuff these days, to be able to know what expected traffic is in different cities or even your own city if you live in a large city that has crazy traffic. The next question is, how many minutes prior to the start of a meeting would your traveler like to arrive? So this could mean some travelers, when they're in the office, they like all their meetings back to back. They don't even need that cushion time. But some, when they're out there on the road, they need that time in between to stop and get a coffee, or just in case they're lost because they're in new settings. They need that 15 minutes prior to each meeting to feel comfortable. And then last, how long do they think it will take to pick up or drop off a rental car? So you have some people that are just really different with this. They like to check out every part of the rental car before they take it. And then you have some that just grab the keys and take off, or, just knowing how much time and cushion they want in their itinerary for such a thing. These questions and preferences also help you determine whether or not a given flight will work for your traveler's schedule. You can also use them when creating end to end itineraries to tell your traveler exactly what time, with expected traffic, they should leave their house or hotel. To get places on time. This includes meetings, the airport, or really just anything where they're out of their normal schedule that they're not used to planning for. On to storing and sharing. After you have created your traveler profile, it's time to store and share it. Google Forms are ideal for this because responses are automatically added to a Google spreadsheet for you, and you can easily share responses with other travel planners. Jotform, Typeform, and Microsoft Office Forms will require you to export or manually enter information onto a separate spreadsheet. If you do not have access to Google Drive or Google Suite, I would recommend using another cloud service to upload and share this information. If you've already created all of your traveler profiles, you can go ahead and upload that information directly to your preferred cloud service. This is super important because you never know when your traveler will need to make last-minute bookings or changes to their trip, and you may not always have the luxury of being in front of your work computer. This way, you can access their information from anywhere, and as an added bonus, when you go on vacation, you can easily share this information with other administrative professionals in the office so they can continue to plan while you are away, and you will not have to deal with having your cell phone on at the beach or whichever lovely vacation you are on. I would, of course, love to share a little bit as well about how TRAVO can be a solution for this. TRAVO profiles combine all of the elements of a form creation tool and a cloud service in one. When you create a traveler's profile on TRAVO, we provide you with all the necessary fields to make sure you have all of your traveler's information and preferences. In addition to being saved within your password protected account, TRAVO is also HTTPS secured and PCI DSS compliant, making it the safest way to store and share your traveler's information. Best of all, TRAVO profiles are integrated throughout the entire trip creation process. You will be able to view all of your travelers' preferred brands directly on the results page, and all of their information will automatically be filled in right at checkout. On to incomplete trip requests. Travelers often submit trip requests in a haphazard way. Too often, it is by stopping by their admin's desk or by sending an email that just says something like, "Hey, I need to go to San Francisco next Tuesday. Can you book a flight and hotel for me?" Administrative professionals are then left with the monumental task of creating an itinerary without having all the information they need. Most of the admins said that every trip request actually requires multiple back and forth emails just to pin down all the basic details like arrival dates, airports, and meeting times. To combat incomplete trip requests, you can use some of the tools we just discussed to create a trip request form and collection process. To make things easier for yourself and your traveler, be sure to use the same form tool that you used when creating traveler profiles to create a trip request form. Every trip request form will be a little different depending on your company's approval process and travel policies. However, there are fields that should be included on every single form. The first field, of course, will be the traveler's name, the next one being traveler's email. This is important, obviously, just for sorting purposes, and also if you work for the type of company that has a lot of candidates coming in for interviews or things like that, it's always important to have a field for someone to specify who they are and who is filling out the form, of course. Third, trip name. This is pretty important because naming your trip is helpful so you can associate various bookings to a single identifier. It just kind of acts as sort of like that tab on the folder saying, hey, this is the name of the trip and this is where all that information is going to be going, and it's all based around this single name. Next is event information. This is the most important section of your travel request form. You want to gather as much information from your traveler as you can, as far as knowing what time your traveler needs to arrive in their destination and what time they can return. Next are going to be requested flights. This should include flight dates, departure airports, and arrival airports. Travelers often forget to specify airports and stop after providing the destination city name. However, certain cities like New York and San Francisco have multiple airports, so specifying is very important. If they don't have a specific airport that they're looking for, this is where the event details come into play, as well as knowing where their events are going to be located at to see which airport is actually going to be the best. Because sometimes it doesn't really change pricing based on certain airports, but it can lead to them having to go completely through the city to get to their destination. And then, of course, needing to know if there are preferred airlines, hotels, and ground transportation for this specific trip. While you can typically find this information in the traveler's profile, it's always good to confirm using the trip request, just because they may have location-specific preferences, or even something like the client that I'm meeting suggested this hotel because it's close and the restaurant's inside, or just places like that where they're able to put that information. Some optional fields that many of our users like to include, or just having a catch-all section at the bottom of the form for notes, is really great. But some of the specific fields that they like to include are client ID number and then supervisor approval received, just because some people have to get their supervisor's approval for the trip before they can actually even send it to somebody for booking or consideration. And then requested per diem amount, just something to include in the trip. That's great to be able to, have all the details in one spot. If you're part of a larger team of travel planning admins, make sure that you are all communicating with each other so there isn't any confusion over who is handling which trip requests. That's really important if you have this system set in place for getting the trip request forms sent in, that you don't have to worry about, wait, is Rebecca working on this, or is James working on this, or am I working on this? Just putting that in the process of how do we signal to each other that the other person is working on it. And then also remember that implementing a new process takes time. Don't expect your travelers to change overnight. Give them time to acclimate to the new form and the new steps that you are putting in place for them. If your travelers stop by your desk with a trip request, remember to ask them some follow-up questions so they will get used to the information you need. Then follow up with them in an email with all the details they provided you, as well as with a link to the trip request form that you have created. Even if it takes a couple trips for them to get the hang of it, it is completely worth it because it's going to save you a lot of time in the end. And I'm excited to share with you now. TRAVO is a solution for this issue as well. Because as we said before, we've spoken with thousands of admins and put things in the tool that are exactly what admins said they needed to streamline their processes. And so, of course, we have a trip request manager that is perfect solution for streamlining this process. We have created the trip request form with all the required fields to create an end-to-end itinerary. Travelers can bookmark this link to access the form whenever they have an upcoming trip. Anytime a trip request is submitted, every admin in your group is automatically notified via email. You can then log into TRAVO and see a list of incoming trip requests. And the great part is, as we mentioned before, if you're working in a team of admins who do travel planning, you're able to assign it to a specific admin for them to work on. So you'll be able to see, oh, James has already taken this over, or be able to mark it with your own name if you're able to take over the trip request. Then also this means that you can see the entire trip creation process from one centralized location. So that's another part of why trip names are important, is it's very similar in here as it would be if you were saving everything on a Google Drive or someplace else, but here you're able to do everything all in one spot. And so that name for the trip is kind of like the title to that folder. It's the tab for you to be able to refer back to and say, okay, so I'm looking at James's the trip that James is working on, and it's for Cindy, who's going to the East Coast, and being able to see everything, all the requests, who it's assigned for, who made the booking, who paid for it, all in one place, be able to pull up those receipts later, and everything is just managed and tracked from one single location. Okay, on to time-consuming research for flights, hotels, and car rentals. As all of you know, researching these items can really take a long time, and just sorting through all the different options that fit your traveler's schedule. But we know it's beyond fitting into your traveler's schedule. It also goes back to the traveler profiles that we discussed creating and knowing how it matches up with that, while also comparing, trying to find the best prices and also what's going to fit with the meetings. And so this typically means opening up a tab for each of your travelers' preferred brands and doing price comparisons across multiple tabs, and then multiply that by 3 for flights, hotel, and car rentals. And before you know it, you could have opened over 15 tabs, which is just ridiculous. And also, too, you're not always just searching based off of their preferences. Sometimes you have to look to see what other options there are because the company often is going to be price sensitive and it's not just based on preferences. So you're having to see all the multiple options. And for hotels, having to not only search based off of preferences and pricing, but mostly on location to make sure they're not going to be having a hefty fee in taxi fees going back and forth from the hotel to their location. Which brings me to why I'm excited to share with you a little bit about how TRAVO has made this easier. Since we know there's a lot of tools out there that you can use for searching, we know what you're familiar with. Everyone's familiar with the kayak and hotels.com and how those regular search engines are going to be able to help you. But I'd like to chat a little bit about how TRAVO allows you to search across all major airlines, hotels, and rental companies in one single tab. So you're going to be able to be looking through all on just one site at the flights and the car rental options and the hotels, making it super easy to view it all in one spot. We work directly with the airlines, hotels, and rental companies to provide you with availability and prices across all the major brands and providers. Combine this with the information from your travelers' profiles and trip requests, and you will instantly be able to find the best available options for your traveler. On top of this, we have teamed up with one of the largest corporate rate providers, so our prices can be up to 20% off publicly available rates. Gone are the days of searching across multiple websites, some of which even open pop ups after pop up and taking screenshots for price comparison. It really just eliminates all of those issues. And before I mention anything else, I do want to remind you that TRAVO is a free tool to use as well. This brings me to booking on TRAVO. When you book through TRAVO, the reservation is passed directly to the provider, so you will see American Airlines or Marriott or Enterprise appear on your credit card statement rather than TRAVO. And as I said before, your traveler's profile is integrated throughout the entire itinerary process, including checkout. When you're ready to finalize your bookings, you will see your traveler's information filled out, including their loyalty numbers. This helps to remove a lot of the stress that admins experience when making bookings. It just automates the things that you were always having to copy and paste and pull in from all these different places when booking. Lastly, we pride ourselves on having the best customer service out there. We have a 24/7 booking support line that answers within 30 seconds and a live chat to help you as you book. Next up is the ever pesky delayed trip approvals. Before you finalize your traveler's bookings, you must get your itinerary approved. This is probably one of the most frustrating hurdles because it is one that relies almost exclusively on your traveler. Administrative professionals can spend days waiting for traveler feedback, and often this feedback comes in the form of questions like, "What are my earlier options?" or "What if I want to fly on Delta?" To respond to these follow-up questions, admins typically have to rerun all of their searches, refilter all of the results, and send additional options based on these traveler questions. A lot of this back and forth can be avoided by anticipating your travelers' questions. Make a note of what they typically ask and start curating a list of options that will answer these questions before they even have to ask them. Format your suggestions using a template like the one pictured with columns for company, details, price, and notes. This makes it easy for your traveler to compare all of their options and respond with their preferred choice. If your traveler does ask for additional options, make sure to ask them to be specific as possible. If they ask something like, "Are there cheaper options?" follow up by asking them about specific brands or times. This will allow you to narrow filters even further and make sure that you are suggesting the correct options as based on what they're looking for. And then, of course, there's sending for approval. However, this is only half of the battle. Until you receive a response from your traveler, you should follow up to make sure as often as you feel comfortable to avoid sudden increases in price. I always find it handy to include a note saying, just so you know, it looks like these flights were in high demand or this hotel was in high demand. So the prices are rising pretty quickly. So if you could let me know as soon as possible, that would be wonderful. Timing is entirely up to you as to how much you want to check up on them because you know your relationship with your traveler better than anyone. And so, another great thing to know is in certain cases, we have even seen some users follow up every 30 minutes. So don't feel like you're following up too often. We have seen people just consistently follow up. It just really depends on your relationship with your traveler. You can also use a tool like Boomerang to set up automatic reminders until you receive a response from your traveler. That is, of course, if you don't think they're going to get too annoyed by those automatic responses. And once again, I'm of course excited to share how TRAVO can be a solution for this. When we were developing TRAVO, simplifying approvals was probably one of our biggest priorities, just because I don't think there's a single travel planner out there that you'll talk to that'll say, oh, yeah. My traveler is super quick at giving me responses on these things, and they always know exactly what they want from the first list of choices. So, as you are scrolling through the hundreds or thousands of different options, you will always have the ability to tag an item and suggest it to your traveler when you're on Travo. This works for flights, hotels, and car rentals. Suggested items are customizable and allow you to create your own tag like earliest, closest, fastest, or best united option. Then, when you send the trip for approval, we will automatically format everything into a pre made table so your traveler can easily see your additional suggested options. We also know that travelers don't always have the luxury of being in front of their computers when they're reviewing the trip you send them. To accommodate this, all of our approvals are completely mobile friendly. When they click approve or decline from their inbox, they are immediately brought to the approval page on Travo where they can approve or decline specific items and add any applicable notes that they would like to. Also, the great thing is you're having everything all in one email, one trip saved there. So your hotel, your flight, your ground options, it's all in one place. So you're not having to send different emails for every little section of the trip. You're able to have the full encompass trip in one, making it a lot quicker for them to review and just kind of see everything all in one place. Also, here's a little bit just to show you the Trip Manager page as well, where it's easy to see the pending approvals on Travo for anything that you've emailed out to your traveler. Um, so through Trip Manager page, this is actually an admin dashboard that we created so you can see all of your upcoming trips at a glance. On this page, you will be able to see current approval and booking statuses so you can easily see what your next steps are. If you see that there is a pending approval from this page, send a follow-up email to your traveler reminding them to approve their upcoming trip. It's awesome to be able to just see that pending and just know that you're waiting on that, so you're not always having to search through your inbox. Last but not least is manually creating end-to-end itineraries. Itinerary creation is a painstaking and meticulous task. Many of the admins that I have spoken to said that they struggle with itinerary creation because it requires you to put yourself in your traveler's shoes and walk through their itinerary from start to finish. This means adding all of your travelers' booking information, meeting addresses, turn by turn directions, itinerary notes, all in one easy to read format that has everything converted into that local time zone, let alone if you're doing an itinerary for a traveler who's going to multiple different time zones and they all want it in one document. And for many travelers, one itinerary isn't really enough. They want a printable copy of their itinerary as well as a version that is imported into their calendar. They also usually want a mobile version that they can have on their cell phone as well. Managing this information can feel overwhelming and leave you without a place to start. So I suggest using a basic template with 4 columns, one for date and time, location details, and notes. Then list everything in your traveler's upcoming trip in chronological order. At the very end, you can go through and convert everything using a time zone converter like time and date. Each item has different information to include in the itinerary columns. So I've segmented it out based off of the different types of information in an itinerary. Of course, let's start with adding flights into the itinerary. Date and time, you're definitely going to want to include departure and arrival times. And if they're going to be flying on a red eye or crossing over a date line, include a little +1 in the itinerary as a form of notification. Then location, include the airport name, airline, and all applicable flight numbers. Details to include confirmation numbers. If there are multiple people sharing the same itinerary, include the traveler's last name after each confirmation number. And then in notes, this is up to you. Many of our users like to include terminal number or airport lounge locations, or if it's for like a really early morning flight or a really late one, letting them know in the terminal what food will be available to them, if anything will be available to them. Onto hotel, you'll want to include the check-in and check-out dates. Location of the hotel, the name and address. If they're going to be traveling internationally, provide the address both in your traveler's native language and the local language. This is really helpful for when they're trying to find their way. Details that you'll want to include, confirmation numbers, of course, and then notes. Contact information for the hotel. Be sure to include the phone number for the hotel and the name of anyone that you may have spoken with to regarding special requests. If they were scared of heights and like lower floors or anything like that. Ground details. Now you're going to want to include the pickup and drop off date and time. Also location, start and end locations, and then details, confirmation numbers if applicable, or expected traffic times. Also notes, so contact information if it's applicable, or say that they're getting picked up and it's going to be a town car, let them know where the person's going to be waiting for them with the sign if they will be on the curb or at the luggage area. And finally, event details. So you'll want to include the event/meeting dates and time, the location, name and address of meetings, then the details, so maybe link to a presentation or any items or documents they need to have with them. And then notes, so contact information for the local admin is always appreciated for them to be able to get help finding their way. After you have added everything to your template, you should print out 2 copies, one for yourself and another for your traveler. Then upload a copy to your preferred cloud service in case your traveler loses their copy and need to print a new one. Once you've done this, you can start copying and pasting the information into your traveler's calendar. Use the exact same notes and details as you did in the traveler's printable itinerary to make sure that all of the information you provided for your traveler is consistent. And I'd love to share a little bit again how TRAVO is a solution for this. TRAVO actually generates itineraries as you search, making it easier than ever to provide your traveler with all of their trip information. As you select flights, hotels, and car rentals, we are automatically adding them to your itinerary. And we have time zone conversion tools built into the product so you no longer have to manually change everything. TRAVO is also integrated with Google Maps, so whenever you add a meeting or event to the itinerary, we will provide you with the expected drive times, forecasted traffic, and turn-by-turn directions. Then, once you finalize your booking, your confirmation numbers are automatically added to flights, hotels, and rental cars, which means you won't have to retype any information. Every TRAVO itinerary can be exported as a Word document and Outlook calendar file, so you only need to build your itinerary once to export it in your traveler's preferred format twice. And as an added bonus, we have created mobile-friendly itineraries that you and your traveler can access from anywhere. Whew, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. I hope that you found our admin chat useful and enjoyed our time together learning about travel planning for others. It is our goal to always provide value to the administrative professional community through knowledge and awesome new tools that can help make your lives a lot easier. It has been such an amazing learning experience for myself and the rest of the team, and we have taken every conversation, tip, and pain point to heart when developing TRAVO. If you have any questions, we would love to chat with you. Just shoot us an email at help@travo.com. If you think TRAVO could be helpful for you, we would love to have you sign up and create your free account today by going to www.travo.com. We are so grateful to be a part of this awesome new version of AdminChat from Executive Secretary and to have a bit of your time today. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.